welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your host, Madelyn.
I'm your repetitive host, Emma.
See, mine, there's no description for mine. Just one time only, host Madelyn.
There you go.
And thanks for tuning in to this week's show. It's a side quest here on this March afternoon at Talk This, and it's my turn to choose. So this week, we are going to be talking about replay value, replayability. Why do we replay games at all? What makes a game worth replaying? Why is this something that holds such a prized place among certain elements of the gaming community? And what games do Emma and I like to replay?
Yeah, this is an interesting topic for me because I don't really replay games.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to look into what would make a game replayable because apparently it doesn't work on me, except in like a very few instances.
Emma is the worst consumer. Or the best consumer, depending on how you think about it.
Yeah.
She's only here to buy your new products, and she will spend minimum time with them. I kid, of course. But this came up for me sort of two reasons. So number one is, if you listened to our most recent side quest 2 weeks ago, you'll know that Clickbait Boyfriend and I have been playing a lot of Binding of Isaac lately, which is a game that often gets thrown out in these kind of replayability discussions, despite the fact, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more later, that I'm not sure if what I'm doing is replaying the game or just continuing to play the game. So we'll talk about that a little more later in the show. But also, I've had a couple of different conversations with people, which is rare, right? I don't talk to anyone but Emma and Clickbait Boyfriend and the rest of the family, generally. But I had a few conversations with people who have happened to have been playing Persona 5 Royal after like their partner played Persona 5 and they saw some of it. And so now it's reignited the conversation of Clickbait Boyfriend starting Persona 5 Royal. Maybe he won't actually do it because he wants to play Pokemon and then Horizon and then maybe Elden Ring. So we'll get to Persona in like roughly 2027. But it did make me think about that and kind of the replay value of the like augmented remake too. So maybe interested in talking about this. I'm not sure if either of those things are really replaying the game or not.
Yeah, the way Persona handles its like re-releases of its games is very odd. I mean, I guess it's not. Kingdom Hearts also does this, to be fair.
That's not... If you're trying to describe your release types as not odd, comparing it to Kingdom Hearts is not a strong argument, I guess is what I would say.
There you go. I guess so.
You're right. It might not be unique. However, not odd may be a step too far.
Persona 5 Royal especially stands out to me because it does the same thing as, well, Persona 3 had like Persona 3 FES and then Persona 3 Portable, and then Persona 4 had Persona 4 Golden. But those ones, Portable and Golden, moved the game to portable systems, right? Mm-hmm. Which sort of makes sense as a way to be like, don't you want to replay the game on the go with new content, right?
Yeah.
But Persona 5 is just like, it's on the PS4 again. Not on the PS3 this time.
R.I.P. PS3.
That's because there's no portable systems anymore, to be fair. But it does feel like it's missing like the appeal of those re-releases somewhere.
Yeah, it does feel like, and this is, maybe we should double back and talk a little bit more about replayability more generally before we get into our Persona case study here. But it does feel like when you're replaying something, whether that was portable and then on a console or vice versa, that it's an acknowledgement that that's a game that's playing a different role in your life. Like, I know you sit and play the Switch on your handheld on your couch, but I don't know if you feel like that's actually, like, does that feel like a meaningfully different experience to you than playing it on the television, or is it just convenient?
I can read text easier.
Okay, but, like, assuming that games get with the program and make text sizes, like, a normal size, that wouldn't, like, you wouldn't feel like that was, you know, different in your life planning. As opposed to, you know, if the idea is, okay, I have my handheld and I often play that on my commute or something like that, right? Or I play it when I'm traveling. That's an acknowledgement that that game is playing a different role in your kind of media consumption ecology than the game that you come home and you play as your primetime entertainment on your big TV at night. At least that's how I sometimes think about the games that I mostly play on the Switch. That's not true of all games, but as I have started to do the modicum of commuting that I do these days, it's like, oh yeah, like there are games that, you know, I think of as sort of my subway games. Anyway, I'll double back. I'll come back to Persona once we've laid the groundwork a little bit more, perhaps. So let's start off by talking about what even is replay value. I hope that it's relatively self-explanatory. I don't really think there's anyone out there who has never re-engaged with a piece of media of some kind, ever. Although there are plenty of think pieces that want to make me believe that there's someone out there, but I don't buy it. So it's something that sort of replay value, I think, is something that is much more, I don't know, just common and like very part of the culture, I think. If you're thinking about books, especially when you're a kid, or TV shows or movies, right? That's pretty much Netflix's whole business model right now, right? I mean, less so. Their whole business model right now is make shows that they don't want to watch in North America, because North America already all has a subscription, right? But you know, sort of a lot of the streaming wars model right now in television is like, oh, Friends is going to be here, The Office is going to be there, you can watch this show on this platform, and you know, you don't want to be separated from your comfort show that you fall asleep to because you're lonely in your tiny apartment, working all the time for minimum wage, barely making ends meet. You gotta have The Office. So, you know, the idea of rewatching television shows is something that's really ingrained, I think, in our culture right now. Sometimes in a mocking way, but in a mostly, like, that's a thing that people do kind of way. But with video games, I feel like the attitude toward it is a little bit different.
Well, TV shows is interesting because, like, before there was streaming, right, you would just, like, catch what was on TV.
Right.
Which made, like, the way those stories were written and the way people watch them different than they do today. But you get stuff like Friends in The Office, where you could just, like, catch an episode, you know? Like, they had ongoing stories more, but you could just, like, grab one and watch it whenever you wanted if it happened to be on TV. And I feel like that sort of made it so, like, you know, you rewatch those things. It's made us part of the culture of that sort of TV show. Whereas video games haven't really, they don't work like that, right? Because there's not a video game network.
Yet.
But even that's streaming.
Yeah, I know.
You know, you don't turn on the TV and there's a video game you can play. You just jump in the middle of it.
Sometimes I do think I need that. They're just like, you're going to play this today. I'm like, okay. But no, that's true. But I also feel like with TV, you know, obviously we had a bunch of box sets of various shows growing up. Mm-hmm. But even that, I don't think I could have ever thought about in the context of, well, how many times am I going to rewatch this and I get my money's worth out of that? And even the conversation around, like, a Netflix subscription mostly there are some people that are like, oh, am I getting my value? Am I going month to month and canceling? You know what I mean? And that happens. But that's, like, not at all the norm, right? There's not conversations that are like, well, unless I'm rewatching 4 hours of The Office a day, it's not worth it to have a Peacock subscription, right? It's not about, like, literal the amount of time you have. It's the fact that there's an access to being able to do that at all.
To be fair, though, do you have to watch 4 hours of Office a day to justify getting a Peacock subscription?
Like, probably. You probably do. I'll be honest. I don't know why you have a Peacock. Well, I don't know. I don't know what else is on Peacock. Maybe there are other shows on Peacock. Who knows? I don't have Peacock. I bid adieu to I said, okay, I don't really need The Office as a comfort television show. But in games, there's this kind of like, well, it's weird, right? So obviously in television, and I hope to a lesser extent in movies and somewhat in books, right? There's a certain percentage of people who don't finish a TV show or a movie or a book or a whatever, right? But in games, that percentage, I have to imagine, is far, far higher. Maybe, television maybe is a little bit of a weird case, depending on kind of how it's being watched and what sort of show it is. But a lot of gamers just don't finish the games that they start to begin with.
Yeah.
And then there's a very vocal, presumably minority contingent that is really focused on somehow wringing the most possible value and time out of their purchase. And so that sometimes poisons the replay value conversation for me. There's interesting conversations to be had about this, but the conversation that exists out there in the world is mostly, I need to get the most dollars, like the best ratio of dollars spent to hours put in this game, which kind of sucks.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because we talk about, like, the TV subscription model in that, like, you're just, well, honestly, probably, if you're active on Twitter, you are using, like, your parents' Netflix account, so you aren't paying for Netflix. You are just watching a lot of stuff for free, on all these streaming services that you happen to have. Or, you're paying...
You're paying for one of them, your best friend is paying for another, your ex-boyfriend is paying for a third one, yeah.
So there's, and because it's like this monthly fee, there's less of a perception of like, this show is costing me this much money, right? Whereas games, games are the main, well, games and books, I guess, but do gamers read? The real question.
That's Emma's next side quest. A deep dive. Gamers and literacy. Do gamers read? Can gamers read?
Games are like the main form of entertainment that's like that's common. That's not like I'm going to a concert or something. That's like a premium purchase, right?
Sure.
Like you buy that game specifically. You're not like I mean, except for stuff like Game Pass, but generally there's still games you have to buy that aren't on that thing. So it's not like I'm paying for access for a whole load of stuff, of shows and movies. You're paying specifically for this game. And I think that the way that our, like, consumer mindset has evolved means that sometimes you're like, I paid $60 for this, and I could have watched all of The Office.
The Office is taking a real beating. Seeing a real beating this episode already. No, it's true, and I get that. But also, like, I buy a lot of things that are disappointing. I try not to buy that many things that are disappointing in my life. But it's like, I get bad food sometimes. I buy clothes that I end up not loving sometimes. I don't do a lot of either of those things because I just don't buy clothes anymore very often, to be honest. And I am so immensely picky about my restaurants that I try not to be in that situation. But it just feels like there are a lot of other opportunities to spend $60 in your life on something that's like reasonably disappointing where we don't think about it that way.
I also wonder, like, how much crossover there is with that contingent that also thinks all reviews suck, you know? And also is deathly afraid of even the smallest spoiler.
Sure.
Because if you don't trust game journalists and hate spoilers, you're buying a lot of stuff without any sort of pre-knowledge about it, you know? And so you're going to end up disappointed sometimes because you didn't do any research. And I think that maybe carries over to, like, I didn't get my money's worth out of this when, I don't know, you could have gone to, like, How Long to Beat and seen that it wasn't as long as you wanted it to be, you know?
Yeah. And obviously a lot of that also comes down to, I mean, I don't buy very many games at $60. I buy almost no games at $60 because I'm always buying games for the podcast, and so I have an endless backlog at any given moment of games that I have bought that are, like, generally $30 or less. And even the occasional game, I think Guardians of the Galaxy might have been $40 when I bought it, but I was still like, oh, that's a deal. Pretty new game. Like, good for me. I got a physical copy. Like, dope. So I can imagine being a little more like, if I paid $60 for something, I guess, and hated it. But yeah, it's just hard to imagine myself really being in that situation because I only buy games I really only buy Kingdom Hearts games at launch. I'm sure that I will get to the point of buying Yakuza games at launch, maybe, although the fact that I know that they always go down on sale to like 15 makes me be like, maybe I could afford to wait a couple months, even if I catch up.
Yeah.
But I only buy games that are $60 that it's like, even if they're disappointing, I'm going to play the whole thing. So
yeah. I think I buy more games at launch than you do.
You certainly do.
Yes. And I have definitely bought games where I've started playing them and I've been like, well, this isn't for me. But at the same time, I often feel like that's on me, not like on the game or the company that made it.
Yep.
Because I'll get, and I've been trying to be better about this year and last year, but I'll get sucked in by like, oh, everybody thinks this is really good. And it probably is really good, but also it's not for me, you know? And it's trying to be smarter about, like, okay, everybody loves Elden Ring, but I don't think I'd have very much fun playing it by myself, so I shouldn't buy that. Right?
Yeah. Just wait. Quickly Boyfriend comes for PAX. He'll install Elden Ring on your PS5. Just see how much he can get through. I'm going to have to suggest this and be like, how much can you get through in 3 days?
Anyway, we should get back on topic, though.
Correct. So, look, we've been kind of knocking this desire for replay value that's out there, but there's nothing wrong with this being something that you value in a game. It's just something that sometimes takes on an outside discussion, centrality sometimes, or something that gets like really asked for in reviews when, you know, I mean, not to go too into the crazy things Joseph Fares says, right? But I think he's totally right in some interviews that he gave a couple of years ago where he said, like, why would, like, developers just like shouldn't care that much about replayability because like what percentage of people are even replaying your game?
Yeah.
Right? Assuming that most people probably for most games are not even finishing your game, like then even a tinier percentage are going to go back and play again. And I'll roll that back a little bit. I think I don't mean to say that developers shouldn't care about it at all, but I think he's right to point out that it has a pride of place that perhaps is not correct given the proportion of gamers who are going to take advantage of it.
Yeah. Yes.
But I also say that coming from a position like you, that I do not really replay that many games. And when I do, I feel a little embarrassed about it. I feel embarrassed about the amount of time we have spent on Binding of Isaac, even though it's unclear that even really is replaying and not just continuing to play. I'm like, I should wean myself off this game. This is embarrassing. And the same thing happened with the yearly Apex obsession that has struck this the other resident of my apartment for the past 2 years. Hasn't happened yet this year, but it always happens. It's like he plays a lot of it, and then he's like, I'm doing too much of this. It's a waste of my time. And I don't know. Maybe that guilt is bad too, but it does feel like, well, I could be trying something new. I could be experiencing new things. But maybe we should talk a little bit more about kind of like, okay, let's say you are a gaming person who likes to replay games. What makes a game good and replayable and desirable to replay?
I watched a video from Design Doc on what makes your game replayable. And he broke it down into like 3 categories while saying that like having or not having these things doesn't make your game better or worse. It just makes it more or less replayable, basically. It depends on the goals of what you're trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. So the first category was novelty, which basically means that by playing it again, you can experience something that you were not able to experience on your first playthrough. So stuff like branching paths, you know, not even necessarily like the dialogue and ending stuff, but being able to unlock like new missions or something by taking a different route in a mission. So it doesn't always have to be like directly story related, but being able to do new maps or levels or stuff like that. It's also playstyle, so games that have you like pick your build at the start or pick the character that you're playing. You can choose the other one and be able to play the game differently on the second run through. And there's also procedural generation, which I think that stuff like Binding of Isaac, roguelikes, and like competitive multiplayer, which falls under another category, like use lessons from making things replayable, right? Mm-hmm. Like the features that make a game replayable are present there, but I also don't think it's like replaying the game necessarily when I go back to Hades. Like Hades doesn't make me want to start a new save file, right? Which is what I would consider replaying it. It just makes me want to continue playing it to see new stuff, basically.
And I do think Hades is, I mean, not to be like, Hades, changing roguelikes forever over here. But, like, I do feel like Hades is a little bit of a special case because, of course, it's a game that's, like, it is the roguelike, but it does reward you continuing to play on that same file with new stuff. Like, Hades almost actively discourages you from starting a new game because, like, there's nothing to lose. There's only something to gain by continuing to play on that same file. So, like, from that perspective, Hades, and, like, to a much, much, much lesser extent, Binding of Isaac, right? Because you kind of, you unlock different powers and power-ups as you play and achieve things, and different endings, I guess. But for Hades, it's like, yeah, definitely, like, that's not replaying, because the story, you know, even if it's just the light kind of side stories continue to advance, right? I feel like it's a little bit more correct for something like Binding of Isaac or maybe Spelunky, but even there, I totally agree that you're talking about something that's a little bit different than me going back and replaying, I don't know, whatever, like Final Fantasy VII or something like that. Not that I've played the original Final Fantasy VII, but I'm just skipping to replaying it.
Yeah, in some ways the, like, calling roguelikes replaying, it's like, well, I replay a boss when I die to it in a video game.
Yeah.
You know? But that's not, like, replaying a game. It's just that the way that these are structured, it's like that. Like, that's the loop.
Yeah.
But it's not, like, replaying necessarily, I guess.
And look, that's an interesting conversation in and of itself of, like, okay, so some games may not be designed to be, like, fully replayable, but if you're going to have, like, something that has, like, a Souls level difficult boss structure, you need to be thinking about, like, okay, so someone's going to be playing this multiple times. What's fun about that? Anyway, I won't branch off into that conversation entirely, but it's, like, an interesting side note of, like, these elements of replayability are important even in games that aren't really designed for you to replay the whole thing.
Yeah. The next category was creativity, which was more player-based than game-based. So if you make a game that's particularly set up for players to do different things in it, so stuff like sandbox games, you will start a new world in Minecraft if you want to do something different. That sort of thing. Sim games, playing Zoo Tycoon, making different zoos over and over again. Or even stuff like Hitman, with its level structure of being able to tackle the levels in different ways, or even make up your own challenges within the levels, right? Just having this sort of space that you can play around in. As well as whether you have support for stuff like mods or user-generated content, can make it worth going back to play the game again, to do things differently.
I feel like I understand that impulse of going back and trying it in a different play style much, much more clearly with Hitman than with some of the kind of commonly cited like RPG open world adventure games that get thrown into the replayability conversation. Like, I understand I'm bad at Hitman, right? I could never do this. I mean, maybe I could. If I kept playing, I would get better, right? And that's part of the game. But I'm bad enough at Hitman that I'm not going to do that. But I understand how in that game it's like, okay, like there's actually a lot of different ways that you can do this that have meaningfully different challenges. Having just finished, quote unquote, finished Skyrim, why would I ever go back and play it with like a different combat play style? It just doesn't feel like it would change anything that would be significant. Anyway, just it's interesting to me to think about like a game that doesn't have like RPG elements where you have different play styles, but still provides you an opportunity to really play the game in ways that are meaningfully different.
Yeah. And I totally get, like, I played a lot of Zoo Tycoon as a child.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely get that impulse of just, or like the Age of Mythology maps, like not the campaign, but like the thing.
I liked replaying the campaign even too, but I think that's different.
Yeah. And being able to like tackle things in different ways. I see that the appeal in that. We can come back to this later, but I also think I was just more friendly to replaying games as a child when I couldn't just be like, all right, I'm going to buy a new game now.
Yeah.
You know? The less freedom you have to buy games, the more replayable games become, I guess.
Well, I'm sure that's where some of this comes from for some of the angry online gamers is, look, I don't, like, obviously there's a certain percentage of people who really don't have the budget to be buying multiple games, and I understand wanting to get your money's worth and, like, that kind of thing, although, frankly, if you're the person who doesn't have the budget, I think you would be better served by buying a bunch of games that are a couple of years old and are on sale, because there are a lot of games, but I won't tell you how to spend your money. But, you know, those, as much as people want to throw that around, like, those are not the majority of the people who are whining about replay value. The majority of the people who are whining about replay value could afford to buy more games if they wanted to anyway. But I do think it comes from a place of, like, okay, like, maybe that used to be something that wasn't possible, right? Either you grew up, like, with arcade games, or games are, I think, cheaper now than they were in a couple of generations ago, in terms of, like, what that money was actually worth.
Sure, but we're also all poor.
That's fair. All right, time to get into the complex economics of what a game costs. $20-$22. But you know, it does like this thinking about this obsession with replayability. I mean, it certainly comes back from that arcade time in gaming history where, yeah, I mean, you really did just need people to keep replaying the game.
Yeah.
Anyway, what's our third?
The last category is called evolution, which is like just the appeal of getting better at the game, being able to take on increased challenges. So this covered like competitive multiplayer, which I do also wonder if that's like really replaying a game or just continuing to play a game. But I do think it takes like design of replayability and incorporates them. You know, there's like the novelty of playing different people, playing a different character, doing a different map. etc. And I think it's because you have to get people... It's like a very short game that you want people to replay over and over and over again, right? So in some ways, that's the most important part of competitive multiplayer. I think that also, like, Evolution also covers the, like, short loop of, like, people who have to play a Souls boss over and over again, right?
Yeah.
Because you learn the boss, right? And I did this with, like, the Kingdom Hearts 3 data battles, right? You play those over and over and over, and you figure the boss out, and you get better at it, right?
Do you still have more of those?
I didn't ever beat the last two or the secret boss, no.
I can't believe you're not referring to any of them by name. This game has been out for 3 years.
It's fine.
You'll
We'll wait for the 20th anniversary event, and then, we're good.
Emma goes live to celebrate the 20th anniversary by getting her butt kicked over and over and over again. We'll have to do it when I'm there, and good luck.
But it's also, like, unlocking, like, challenges, right? Like, Kingdom Hearts 3, too, also, I think just, like...
Don't say Kingdom Hearts 3, too.
But
That's
sorry, Kingdom Hearts 3, again.
Kingdom Hearts 3, 2 is going to be announced at the 20th anniversary event, so, like...
They added critical mode after launch, which provided an incentive to come back and replay it on a higher challenge. And critical mode also included... I don't remember if it was just critical mode or if it was all modes, but they added, like, a menu that you could turn on and off certain features to either make the game easier or harder for you, which, again, would create a greater challenge for people who wanted to come back and, like, master the systems of that game. This also covers, like, speedrun-friendly games, right? If your game has designed as something that can be speedrun. As well as just players being able to use your systems to make their own challenges, like Pokemon Nuzlocke, for instance. Create an incentive to play that game that really has nothing to do with the designers. It's just the system has allowed players to make their own, like, challenges that other people can participate in as well.
And so hearing you talk through all of this has really reinforced... I read this somewhere and it resonated with me that really the thing that's at the core of replayability, like, there are all of these things that you can add and you can do to make the game more replayable once you get here, but at the core of it, it really comes down to the gameplay experience has to be such that players want to continue playing, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you have, like, a big sandbox, it doesn't matter if there are different character classes or branching missions, right? Like, I think about you in Fire Emblem, right? And it's like, especially here now in our, 2010s, 2020s, you can go on YouTube and you can watch the branching paths if you want to, right? There's no reason for you to go back and replay through the whole game unless you want to, right? I'm sure that was something that was very different for, like, dating sim, branching paths type games earlier in gaming history, right? In that time, you really would have to, like, figure it out and try things out if you were going to see it all. But now, there's not really an incentive to do that unless you enjoy the game.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting because I think about, like when I was a kid, I played Fire Emblem 7 and 8 so many times, right?
Yeah.
And Sacred Stones, which is 8, has this branch where you can either accompany Erica or Ephraim, like, in the middle of the game. And, like, I played that how many times? And I think I only picked Ephraim, like, once.
Erica's
like, I wasn't replaying that to see the branching path. I was replaying it so that I could do the stupid Innis map over and over again. To show my mastery.
But see, Fire Emblem knows it has to be good because those designers know that everyone is already replaying 3/4 of each level like 3 times. So it's built into the first playthrough as well. They're like, okay, this needs to be fun enough that when your character dies on the second to last turn, you need to be frustrated, but you need to not just put the game down.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it makes a lot of sense that that would expand to, you know, a broader replay because they already know. I mean, who is the monster out there letting their characters die in Fire Emblem?
I know, seriously. I don't understand how people can do that. Except for speedrunners, I guess.
When I lost one of the kids. Have you seen a speedrun of Three Houses? I haven't watched a whole one.
Yeah, they just murder all of them.
Yeah, like, just like everybody dies at the beginning. It's faster. So what about things that make games less replayable? Looks like you've got notes on that too.
Well, it's basically just the opposite, right, of all those three categories. Yeah. Like, do you have particularly linear levels? You know, are you making, like, Uncharted, for instance, doesn't really have replay value because that's not the style it's going for. It's like a cinematic action game. You know, there's not a lot of variety to how you can play Drake. Or something like a non-branching visual novel, like the Phoenix Wright games. Unless you're like, I really want to re-experience this story again, there's not really any reason to replay those games because there's one set path for you to take. Or stuff like really, if you have like a really overpowered weapon in your game, that can also diminish replay value because players will use that to solve every problem. And that doesn't encourage experimentation. Or if there aren't a lot of places to go and things to do, you just like run through a level, that might lower your replay value. And also, this was in relation to multiplayer games, but I think it's actually true for all games, is the smaller your community, the smaller your player base, I feel like the less likely people are going to replay that game. Right? Because I think there's like a peer group that you're excited about this game, you know, lots of people are excited about this game, you want to talk about this game with people, maybe that would lead you to replay a game. But if it's just you playing the game, then probably not, right?
Yeah. No, it has to be that much more intrinsically valuable to you if you're just going to replay it for your own experience, for sure.
Yeah. And again, none of this makes games worse, necessarily. It just makes them less replayable.
Right. Some of the things that make a game more replayable probably also make the game better. But that's just, you know, the game can't be bad. It's hard to have a game that's bad that you want to replay. Yeah. Unless it's coming from that nostalgia place, which plenty of people replaying games, like, that is where it comes from.
Yeah.
And that's where the whole sort of remaster port business even comes from, right?
Yeah.
Surely the business model of those games, well, I don't know. I guess that's something that I am curious about, is when a game, you know, presumably a game that like mostly was inaccessible to being played before gets ported to a modern system or gets remastered or something like that. I wonder what proportion of the players playing it have already played it and what proportion are new.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting stat to know, I think.
I'm sure that some game companies must know this.
Yeah.
But I do not.
I mean, for me, again, this is something that just, like, doesn't really apply to me. The Kingdom Hearts games have been ported to modern systems, and I've gotten them as they've gotten them, mostly because I've passed on my old copies to Madelyn or something like that.
Charitable.
But other than that, we just did not play a large variety of games in our childhood, I feel like. Especially not ones that, like, have been remastered or remade in any particular way. So whenever there's a remaster or remake, I'm like, oh, I can play it for the first time. Not, oh, I'm so excited to play it again.
Yeah, if they remade X-Men Legends, especially with a multiplayer co-op, I'd make us do that.
I would like them to bring the old Fire Emblems to Switch.
Well, no.
Yes. If Nintendo did that, I would buy them. unfortunately,
Nintendo has more money than God.
only remember. No play.
Remember.
Only remember.
So maybe we should talk a little bit about these kind of like, well, what are the games that we do replay? What are the games that we have played that maybe count as replay, maybe don't in that world? What games have you replayed, Emma?
Fire Emblem.
Okay.
Various parts of the Kingdom Hearts series. I'm planning to replay Final Fantasy 15 after I finish Cold Steel. I really think that's it. I don't count stuff like Nier Automata, right? Because that's not replaying it, that's just continuing the game.
Agreed.
There's been stuff that I've re-experienced through watching a Let's Play after I've beaten it. But generally these have been like story-heavy games, you know, where I'm interested in seeing how the story fits together as well as maybe how other people react to it. Mm-hmm. So that's not really like, I wouldn't have replayed it. This is like something I do as a separate impulse to replaying a game, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I really think that's it. I really think those are all the games that I have replayed.
So why are you even doing this show?
I don't know, Mel. It was your topic. What do you replay?
I'm just kidding. Yeah, not very much. Who's got the time for that? I don't. I do, I've replayed the original Kingdom Hearts, and I suppose Chain of Memories, sort of, technically, a few times. I remember it being very meaningful to me to have, like, replayed the first Kingdom Hearts game, and then finally actually finishing Chain of Memories and Kingdom Hearts 2, like, right before I went to college. That was sort of like a meaningful sort of returning to the game, actually finishing the game, being better at it, and, understanding what was going on, lol. Mm-hmm. But then I've replayed Kingdom Hearts again, like, maybe one time since then. It's a little weird for me because, like, when I have the impulse to replay a game, I'm just like, Clickbait Boyfriend hasn't played that. Let's try to make him play it instead. It's like, I'm sort of like I'm toying around with replaying Yakuza 0, but I'm like, I shouldn't do that. Like, I have 4 more games to play. Let's just, if that's going to happen, let's just, like, bully Clickbait Boyfriend into doing it and let me play a little bit of Breaker Style every once in a while. So I do have that outlet, right? Mm-hmm. I can't believe in the notes that you said to me, I think Katamari Damacy is your friends. What a sentence. That's a sentence that has never been typed before.
I think it's true. I think that's your friends. I think that's your comfort game.
I agree. I will say that I'm getting to the point now where we are too, this is so braggy, we're too good at Katamari. But the thing there is actually that I don't start a new save file. I don't start from the beginning. I just use the same save file that has presumably existed for quite a long time, because I mostly play this on the PS. In fact, I exclusively played this game on the PS3. So
I think it's similar to, like, replaying levels in Hitman.
Right.
Because you're replaying levels in Katamari.
No, that's true. I just wanted to make the point that I'm not just starting it over from the beginning as one might with Friends over and over. I'm instead watching each episode of Friends several times in a row in the attempt to best understand and do the best job watching it that I could.
If anyone out there does that, that's interesting.
Watch the same episode over and over.
To fully understand the motivations of each of the characters.
I mean, like, I think it's fine. Like, I guess I'll say it's like curating your binge. I've definitely done that with rewatching shows, being like, I'm gonna only rewatch the good episodes, or the best episodes. But I don't think watching the same episode over and over again is ever quite.
Could Chandler be anymore? We must carefully watch the episode in order to answer this question.
That would be a pretty fun. That'd be a pretty fun watch to be like, I'm gonna watch each episode and decide, could he be any more whatever, and just like watch the episode like 3 times to decide if there are opportunities where he could have been more.
Exactly.
You're right to say that I think Katamari has definitely served that kind of like comforting game thing, but I think that that's like, that almost speaks more to why I don't replay games than to why I do, because Katamari is very much like, yeah, you jump in and you replay a level, and what comforting games need to be for me is games that I can fool myself at least into saying that I can play them for like half an hour, or games that I can use to trick my brain into sort of thinking it's relaxing while I'm also doing something productive, like between levels, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's why I don't very often replay full story linear games, is because it feels frivolous. With Katamari, I get better over time. And I can see that. Stars get bigger. Also, Katamari is just soothing in general, so there's that. But I don't do a lot of, I don't know, maybe it's because we like get to talk about the games on the show, and so I don't have to, like, I'm not alone in my video game cavern, like, having to just think about it myself. Like, there were a lot of, some of the discussion around replaying games that wasn't just, I need to get every minute of playtime squeezed out of my $60, was around the idea of like, okay, once you've played it through once, you can kind of go back and appreciate a little bit more what the game is doing. But I feel like the podcast more or less serves as that for me. Getting to talk about the game often kind of has that same effect.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something important to do if, say, you're writing a paper on that game. Sure. Or, you know, something to that effect. You know, if you need to know a lot about that game in order to argue some sort of thesis about that game, yeah, you should probably play it more than once. In the same way you might watch a movie or read a book more than once, right? In that way. But yeah, and it's not that I don't think that there's value in doing that, right? I get value out of, you know, watching people play games that I've already played because I see parts of the story that I didn't see before, you know, the way things fit together. But if I can just do that by watching a video of it again, why would I play it again? I guess is also the thing. I can do other things while I'm watching the video of it, you know? Maybe we just have a horrible need to be productive in all aspects of our life.
Well, so that's not a maybe. That's a yes, but it's just a matter of whether that's what's driving this urge here. It probably is. I mean, I won't lie. That's definitely part of what's behind it. But, you know, I think it's also the fact that, I don't know about you, but, like, I play a lot of, like, good games. Mm-hmm. I don't play a lot of games that I'm like, oh my god, that's so good. I wish it had never ended. I also think that I don't have such completionist tendencies, and look, some replay value is built around the toxic, I just think that achievements are toxic, right? They're like built around the toxic achievement system of today. But I just don't, I just very rarely do I play a game where I, like, feel like I've left myself a lot to do. I have enough of a completionist tendency that even in the games that are like, oh, it's so big, like, you won't be able to do everything, I'm like, I'm not going to go back and replay it, so I better do everything. Yeah. So maybe I am functionally doing what the team thinks I will get on 3 replays in one playthrough, but I prefer that.
There is something in my brain that upon seeing credits is like, okay,
we're done.
I'm done. You know?
Yeah.
Like, once the credits roll, it's like, okay, there you go.
On to the next one.
Yeah.
And it's like, even in I'm like, even in the games that it's like I sort of do wish, it's like, oh, like I really, obviously, like there are some of the Yakuza games that it's like, oh, I really like this. I would have kept playing in this world. But it's like, oh, but I can just play the next one and it's the same.
Yeah, that is also true. I think Yakuza does make it less replayable by the fact that there are a lot of them, you know?
Yeah.
So you don't have to go back specifically to this one game to necessarily get the same feeling. You can go on to the next one and get the Yakuza experience more, you know?
Yeah. And, you know, there's a big culture of, like, 100%ing those games, of course, which is just not
I can't even imagine. How much mahjong must you play?
Should I get into mahjong? I feel like that's the next step.
No. I don't think I could talk to you anymore if you understood mahjong.
Yikes, okay.
I think there's two types of people in the world. The people who understand what mahjong is and how to play it. And then everybody else. And, like, the mahjong people are in, like, the upper echelons of, like, higher minds, you know? And then there's, like, the commoners down below.
Fair enough.
I think it changes you, like, genetically to understand mahjong.
Who knew that Emma's mahjong genetic conspiracy theory would get aired on this Replay Value podcast?
I don't actually think that. Just putting that out there. But I don't understand it at all. I also don't get poker, so maybe I'm, like, down at the very, very bottom of society.
I think it's okay. I think not understanding poker actually probably puts you a step ahead of people who do understand poker, actually.
Maybe.
But it is, I hadn't thought about this until just now, like, how it is interesting how having a sequel can both drive and disincentivize replayability, right? Like, in some ways, all of the Kingdom Hearts sequels make me kind of long more to replay the first one, right? Because I'm like, we can just kill Clayton. Like,
not Clayton.
Oh.
Remember when
Tarzan
existed?
Why is that burned into my... Like, it's because I played that game multiple times.
Well, also because of the lack of a skip cutscene feature. You know?
Yeah, of course.
That's the one we played the most when we could not skip cutscenes. And so when we died to not Clayton, we saw that scene over and over again.
Yeah. Which is a good point, right? If you want your game to be replayable and it consists of any significant story, you need to have a skip cutscene or chapter select or something.
Yeah.
Because nobody wants that.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, right, if you have a sequel that is more or less sort of similar mechanically, right? It's like, oh, I'll just play the newer one.
Yeah.
Well, anything else to say about replay?
You know, I do have, like, games I want to replay.
Right.
In those cases, it is just a matter of, like, but I also have the endless backlog.
Yeah, I know.
Weighing down upon me.
A privilege and a curse.
Yeah.
Do you think people get more out of this episode if they listen to it twice?
No.
Dang.
I think they should go learn how to play mahjong.
And then Emma will never talk to you ever again, is what she says.
I just think that, like, you just, like, talk past each other, you know? Something doesn't connect anymore because you've changed so fundamentally.
You just, like, reachy, and you're like, I'm out.
Yep. Exactly.
Well, listeners, are you the mythical person who has never replayed or rewatched anything? Because if so, I'd like to talk to you. But do you have favorite games to replay? Do you think it counts as replaying when you continue to play a roguelike or competitive multiplayer or something like that? Or does that fall into some kind of weird, undefined middle ground, as is often the case with talking about things in video games? What to you drives your desire or lack of desire to replay a game? Do you go back and re-listen to old episodes of the podcast? I'll tell you where in just a minute. But first, if you have thoughts on any of those things or anything else about the show, you can hit us up on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, check out the games that are in the hat for our main editions like next week, and read our blog featuring long-running series Clickbait Boyfriend, where Clickbait Boyfriend basically replayed the Kingdom Hearts games for me, although he was playing them for the first time. Should I do Clickbait Boyfriend, Clickbait Boyfriends, like where he replays the Kingdom Hearts series and re-comments?
No.
Re-mind, re-chain of memories. And also Split Screen, where Emma is re-watching My Hero Academia. Although I guess we're not, it's not true anymore.
It's not true anymore. A lot of it was rewatching.
Now, we're both just watching My Hero Academia and Crash Landing on You. So, check that out on the blog and more. But most importantly, if you like the show and you want to listen to it every Sunday at noon or dig into sort of the rest of the show archive, you should subscribe. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Casts, wherever you can find podcasts, you can find Talk This. Next week is a main edition. It is about some games for sure.
You're talking about Trauma Center and Ollie Ollie World.
Right, and I was like, ha ha ha, doing surgery on a skateboard.
Yeah, yes.
It'll be like Operation.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that I've already come up with the mashup again, this time a week in advance, but 2 weeks in advance. And then 2 weeks after that, it'll be Emma's turn to pick a side quest.
Not sure yet, so we'll see.
I figured. At some point, we'll have in I guess April or early May, we'll have a PAX special, our usual PAX special edition, I guess.
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm already, that's already, coming up in the lineup.
Yeah.
So, subscribe, people. You don't want to miss that. Or Emma's Side Quest. Or Trauma Skateboard Center.
Well, do you want to sign us out?
Listeners, I hope you have a good week. 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 I hope you have